Hello everyone, today I'll be sharing another legal story with you. So what happened on 15 September 2025 is that the Supreme Court was dealing with the case of in reference the Waqf Amendment Act 2025. In this case basically several petitions were filed that were challenging the constitutionality of the amendments that were made to the Waqf law, right? So basically recently a Waqf Amendment Act 2025 was brought, and through this Waqf Amendment Act 2025 certain changes and amendments were made to the Waqf law, and these amendments that were brought to the Waqf law using this Waqf Amendment Act 2025, these were challenged through these petitions, and basically the constitutionality of these amendments were challenged. Okay, so while hearing the case, they pass an interim order and they state certain provisions of this Waqf Amendment Act 2025. So through this interim order, they state certain provisions, okay, of this Waqf Amendment Act 2025. First provision that they state was the condition that was imposed through section 31R. So section 31R imposes a condition that in order to create a waqf, the person should have practiced Islam for a period of 5 years. Okay, so this condition is stayed, and this condition is stayed till the time the state government provides a mechanism to determine the question that whether the person has practiced Islam for 5 years or not. So till the time the state government, they do not provide a mechanism for determination that whether the person has practiced Islam for 5 years or not, till the time the mechanism is not provided, the condition under section 31R that the person in order to create waqf should practice Islam for 5 years has been stayed. Okay, why it has been stayed? Because without such a mechanism it would lead to arbitrary exercise of power. Okay, so till the time the government do not provide a mechanism, it might lead to arbitrary exercise of power. Okay, that is the reason why this condition under section 31R is stayed. Okay, thereafter the Supreme Court stayed the provision of section 3C2. So basically section 3C provides a mechanism, right? It provides a way to determine the title of that disputed property. A waqf property is in dispute between the waqf board and the government. In that case, a designated officer is appointed, and that designated officer will inquire regarding the disputed property, and after the completion of the inquiry he will submit a report regarding whether the property belongs to government or not. Okay, once the designated officer determines that the property belongs to government, certain changes will be made in the revenue record, right? And thereafter the report will be submitted to the state government. Okay, section 3 also says that the state government, on receipt of report from the designated officer, they will direct the board, that is the Waqf board, to make changes in their record also. Okay, all these provisions, that is 3C2, 3C3 and 3C4, they have been stayed by the Supreme Court. Okay, what does 3C2 says? 3C2 says that if the property is in dispute between the board and the government, then in that case not treat that property as a waqf property till the time the designated officer submit his report on to whether the property belongs to government or not. What it is saying is that let's say the property is in dispute here. Okay, designated officer is appointed here. Okay, the designated officer begins his inquiry here. Okay, and after making the inquiry he submits his report to the state government. Till the beginning of the inquiry to the submission of the report to the state government, in this duration we will not treat the property, the disputed property, as a waqf property. This basically is stated in section 3C2, and this provision has been stayed by the Supreme Court. Okay, also the provision that is 3C3, which says that the designated officer after the completion of inquiry, if the property belongs to the government, he will make necessary correction in revenue record, and thereafter he will submit the report to the state government, has also been stayed. Okay, and the provision that the state government, after receiving the report, they will direct the board to make changes in the record, this also has been stayed by the Supreme Court. Okay, all these three provisions, 3C2, 3C3, 3C4 has been stayed. Okay, these provisions are stayed because the designated officer, that is the collector, who will determine the rights of the property, who the title of property belongs to, either the board or the government, right, that is determined by the collector. And if we give the power of determination to him, this is against the doctrine of separation of power, as executive cannot be permitted to determine the rights of the citizen. That is why the three provision, 3C2, 3C3, 3C4 has been stated by the Supreme Court. Okay, also, unless the issue of title is not finally decided in the proceedings under section 83. So section 83 talks about the proceedings that before the tribunal regarding the disputed property, right? So unless the issue of title is not finally decided in the proceedings under section 83 of Waqf Amendment Act 2025, which talks about the proceedings before the tribunal, so the tribunal will decide the title, right, unless the proceedings are not finally decided. Okay, and subject to the further order of the High Court, if in case they prefer appeal, right, if in case the parties prefer appeal, subject to that order of the High Court that is made in the appeal, neither the Waqf will be dispossessed of the property nor the entry in revenue record and records of board will be changed. So till the time the proceedings under section 83, that is the proceedings before the tribunal, is completed, and if the appeal is preferred, then subject to the further order of the High Court, till that time neither the Waqf board will be dispossessed of the property nor there any changes will be made in the records, in the revenue records and the records of the board also. Okay, this has been provided in this interim order. Okay, neither any third party interest will be created during the commencement of the inquiry by the designated officer till the completion of section 83 proceedings before the tribunal, subject to the further order of the High Court in case an appeal is preferred. So during all the proceedings, during the inquiry by the designated officer, thereafter the 83 proceedings before the tribunal, or if an appeal is preferred, then in that case during that appeal is decided, during this whole period no third party interest will be created. Okay, Supreme Court directed that the Central Waqf Council should not have more than 4 non-Muslim members, and in case of State Waqf Board, not more than 3 non-Muslim members. So Supreme Court also directed that in case of Central Waqf Council, there would not be more than 4 non-Muslim members, and in case of State Waqf Board, there would not be more than 3 non-Muslim members. Okay, Supreme Court did not state section 23, which allows a non-Muslim to be a chief executive officer of a state Waqf board, but directed that as far as possible efforts to be made to appoint a Muslim person as the CEO of state Waqf board. So Supreme Court did not state but made a direction that efforts to be made that as far as possible the chief executive officer of the state Waqf board to be a Muslim, right? A effort to be made. Okay, these are certain provisions have been stated, certain have not been stated, right? So this is what happened in the proceedings recently. Let's wait for the further updates on this case. Okay, thank you so much.